My name's Henrik Hoffmann. I'm a founding partner of Nordic Gambling, a Nordic-focused legal firm. And with me today I have Gustaf Hoffstedt from the Swedish Trade Organization, Mika Kuismanen from the Finnish Trade Organization, and Peter Paul de Goeij from the Dutch Trade Association. We've been asked not to make too long an introduction, and we would really like to keep, at this late hour in the afternoon, a peppy and interactive discussion. And the focus here is what is going to change and what is new, and what are concerns in the Nordic markets and in the Netherlands. And I believe the newest news we have came in Sweden on Monday regarding the main topic of any regulation, namely the channelization of customers into the regulated market and out of the gray or black markets. So Gustaf, what kind of information did you get in Sweden on Monday?
Hi everyone, and thanks for the question, Henrik. Well, we asked an institute to measure the channelization in Sweden. Obviously, the channelization number is how we assess whether a licensing system is functioning or not. Because if the consumers are within the regulated market, then it is a success. If they prefer to be elsewhere on the unregulated market, it's a failure. And I actually understand when I look at the other gentleman here that I am the mature guy in this panel. These guys are the teenagers, actually, because Sweden re-regulated 2019.
You look very mature.
Thank you, Mika. Whereas Finland hasn't re-regulated yet, and the Netherlands just recently did
2021,
so.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway, and all jurisdictions, they ask themselves, is the re-regulation a failure or a success? And in Sweden, the Swedish government wisely decided that at least 90% of the gambling in our country shall be channeled to the regulated market. And we have been questioning, we as Trade Association have been questioning a number of measures that the Swedish government and the Swedish Gambling Authority that they have implemented, because we have been advocating that, hey, maybe those measures are a problem when it comes to defending the licensing system. And last Monday, to answer your question, Henrik, last Monday we were able to present the latest channelization numbers for Sweden, and they state that only 77% of Swedish online gambling takes place within the gambling within the regulated market, and that is obviously insufficient. It's actually dramatically problematic that almost every fourth Swedish krona is our currency, is leaking out of the system, despite the fact that we re-regulated the market so relatively recently. And just one final note, it's even worse for online casino. That's not a surprise perhaps, but we only channel 72% when it comes to online casino. So we do face some severe challenges in Sweden to protect our licensing system that I am the first one to defend and salute. Maybe we can talk about possible measures later.
Well, have better luck in the Netherlands.
Well, yeah, we reported recently, or at least the KSA, which is a Dutch regulator, reported a 92% channelization rate.
Wow.
Channeling rate. Whether that number is correct, I dare not say, but I'm positive of nature, so I hope it is correct. But I just want to hook on to what Gustaf just mentioned, outside the financial impact, which of course is not good for Swedish economy and Swedish tax receiver. There is the prime directive why we introduce regulated systems in countries, and it will happen in Finland now as well, is to offer consumer protection to all citizens in that country. And if citizens, if people are channeled away towards the, let's say, unregulated websites, and in the cases where the markets are regulated, these operators that are on the other side tend to be rather black than gray. So you might end up gambling with a company based out of or under a license in Curacao. Basically, you put your own citizens to the dangers of organized crime, because half of these operators on these very tropical places, they have no interest in responsible gambling. They have no interest in paying taxes. They have no interest in making sure that consumers are protected. So it is in the interest of consumer protection to have the highest channelization rate possible. And now on to the Netherlands. So I said it's 92% according to the KSA, but there is a bit of a, let's say, conundrum. Once you regulate a market, you get hard data in, so you can see how big the market is. You can see how much people are spending with regulated operators, and you know how well consumer protection is working. But you still do not know how big the illegal market is. And that is a problem that we currently face in the Netherlands. And we see that there is a tendency to underestimate the size of the illegal market. And it is impossible to have a clear view of the illegal market, because worldwide there are over 100,000 online gambling websites. You cannot track that, even not with 1,000 people working for your gambling regulator. And you cannot also not track it by using very good algorithms. You can have a sense of what is going on. But these illegal operators, and especially the pitch black ones, they are very, very quick. Once you push down one, two others will spring up somewhere else under a different URL. And this is something that is really worrying me. And although we have a very good and strict system in the Netherlands with good consumer protection, the focus, I think, is not enough on combating illegal operators, which I think should be done more, and I think is exactly what Gustaf said for the Swedish market. But there you have it.
Mika, in Finland right now, you still have a lot of illegal operators. I believe the government program came out end of last week.
Yeah, that's true.
Is that encouraging for the gambling industry, or is it all talk in Finland and no action?
No, it's not all talk. It's very encouraging. But when I listen Gustaf and Peter Paul, reminds me that almost everything is relative. I would be very happy to speak about channelization rate about 77 or something, because we are speaking about 50 in our not so fashionable monopoly system. So there is a lot of way to go forward in Finland in comparing you guys. But the question about the program, it's not just a talk. I'm actually bit of a positive side on when judging the government program. I'm pretty sure that things will move forward, and they will move forward probably a faster pace than majority thinks. And why is that? Because there is a big political consensus there that we need a change. There are hard numbers speaking for the change, and also the competition environment, the digitalization development speaks for change. And I personally think that there is a very good chance of having a new system up and running from the beginning of 26.
All right. Well, Peter Paul mentioned it, fighting the legalized market instead of the illegal market. Is that the experience in Sweden, that it's the legal market being challenged?
Yes, definitely, Henrik. We've seen that in Sweden, and we see that in almost any other European jurisdiction, namely that as soon as the gambling market is re-regulated with a licensing system, from the gambling authority and from the government, there is a shift in their focus. They focus only, or at least almost only, on the licensed operators. And in a Swedish context, it led to extremely hefty fines sent to the license holders. I think there are approximately 50 such fees, and some of them are at the level of 10 million euro or so. And it was also extremely tempting in a Swedish context, but same thing in many other jurisdictions, to invent new layers of regulation towards the licensed operators. Not to mention the period of COVID restrictions that we all went through. And my government decided to implement a number of restrictions that were not so well received by the consumers, because that is what we have to face and understand, but also the legislator and the regulator, that the decision where to gamble is never taken by a trade association or a gambling operator or a government or a parliament. It is the consumer that is the king and the queen to take that decision. And if the jurisdiction creates thresholds that are too high, then the consumer decide to go elsewhere. I believe that is the reason why we are struggling with not a channelization as bad as in an unregulated market such as Finland, but we could do so much better. And I can't emphasize enough what Peter Paul said about what's the reason behind a re-regulation. I can see three reasons, and the first priority must always be consumer protection, just as Peter Paul said. The other reason, I assume, is that any government also wants to receive some tax. And the third reason is that the companies that we represent, they want to be profitable. And if the state, if the jurisdiction is unable to safeguard its own channel, its own licensing system, why the heck should we be there if there are no consumers there?
Mika, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, in the case of Finland, I think we are in a kind of sad case about the example that when you postpone the reform too long, you will lose players to illegal markets. Now it's 50. So it's very easy to simulate that it will be a hard job to get those players back and to have, let's say, a 90% generalization rate. That would take time, and that would really need a lot of measures. And I think that as a nation we did a big mistake of postponing this reform, and now we will see that we at some way we are paying the price for it.
But Peter Paul, it was a very hard birth in the Netherlands for your regulation.
Yeah,
you seem to have recovered well.
We were expecting, in a way, since 2012, when the remote gambling bill was introduced and it was sent to Parliament in 2013. And I remember back then I was working in the lottery industry, and people from the online gambling industry told me, yes, in 2015 we will have a license and our market will open, and you will have to wait for the lottery market to open after that. And in 2016 I got a lottery license, and the market for online gambling opened in 2021. So it took a long time. Back then it was a very modern system, I would say. It was a principle-based regulation, which in general I favor, but by now we've come to learn that sometimes it's better to have rule-based regulation. For instance, when you look at duty of care, which is a very vague principle, also in Dutch law. So if you would ask a legal scholar in the Netherlands, can you please describe me in 3 sentences what the duty of care in the Netherlands is, they will not manage, or it will be a very vague answer, and all the answers will be different. So that's just an example. Another example is where we went miserably wrong. And I'm saying this also because my good friend here on the right-hand side, they still have to go through this. So I hope you remember this.
We will.
We had in our legislation, very much like in Sweden, that all advertising for online gambling should be moderate, whatever that may be. And how do you decide what is moderate for the total market? And that is where we failed. And then politicians came out and said, you see, you cannot trust this market, They try to make as much money as possible, and then they go in competition with each other, and they advertise a lot. Yeah, whatever. What do you think that happens to companies that you ask to apply for a license and go into competition with each other? So we had no fail-safe. We had no clear guidelines. And on that marketing bit, if you compare Sweden to the Netherlands, I witnessed the panel on Finland 3 panels ago, which was very interesting. And there they said, well, we have to look at what happened in Sweden, we have to look at what happened in the Netherlands. In Sweden, I think there was no big problem on marketing. And why is that? Because Swedes were used to a lot of marketing already for online gambling. And this is not the case in the Netherlands. So before the 1st of October 2021, there was no marketing for online gambling in the Netherlands. And then from the 1st of October on, it was a tad much. I have to admit that, it was a tad much. If you don't like advertising, it becomes irritating, and then it's advertising for online gambling. Well, there you have a political row in the making. So, and as far as I know, in Finland, there's no advertising for online gambling, except for Veikkaus. So probably it's best to look at the Netherlands on how not to do it in Finland.
Yeah.
If I may comment, Henrik, another possibility is, of course, to have a total ban on advertising. I spoke to an Italian colleague last week in a meeting in Lisbon, and he told me that Italy decided to totally ban gambling advertising. So when you actually Google online casino, you do receive a lot of suggestions on where to gamble, but only for unlicensed operators, because the licensed ones are not allowed to market themselves.
Strangely enough, and this is a bit of a hobby horse for me, strangely enough, Google results, search results, are not considered advertising by some countries. Strangely enough. Because you do have to pay Google if you want a high rank in the results, which basically spells advertising to me. Even in the Netherlands, where Google is abiding by Dutch law and is saying, you should have a license if you want to advertise on Google and you want to be in the paid search results. Still, 2 out of 6 paid search results go to illegal gambling websites. How can that be? How can that be?
That's a good question. I believe that to safeguard a channelization system, the industry has to safeguard it together with the regulator and the legislator. And the lack of such companionship is probably what we've seen in my jurisdiction, as well as in many others that are suffering with the low channelization. And I do believe also that it's important to remember and to emphasize that it is possible, it is in reach to actually reach much better channelization numbers. We do not focus on Denmark today, Henrik, because you are the moderator, but our neighbor has shown that you can actually reach 90, possibly even 95% of channelization and have a strong consumer protection within that system. The United Kingdom is another example of a jurisdiction that at least had a high channelization. So we can, if we want to, but if we start a newly re-regulated market by harassing the license holders, the ones that just received a new license, then we will for sure have a problem with our gambling market. And I do notice that Finland, as an example, that I don't know if they have decided yet, but I do know that they look upon a possible implementation of a cool-off period. That would be to tell the operators that, no, wait, you cannot enter the market now. We have to favorize our old state monopoly for quite some time, and then perhaps later you can enter the market.
Yeah, but Gustaf, we already have some kind of cool-off period in Finland at the moment. So it is already there.
You're there.
So, yeah, so it would be a disaster to continue, and I think it's legally also problematic. But your point about the cooperation is very important. I think in Finland we still have a relatively hostile environment towards foreign companies, towards competition in this industry. And if we keep this mental hostility, it won't bring a good result. So there is a lot of things to work, and we really need to work together with civil servants and police board that we will get out finally a good system.
But on that point, Mika, one thing that, I mean, I've assisted more than 30 applications for a license, both in Denmark and another 30 in Sweden. And even though legislation is almost identical, to a large extent it really is, the attitude of the gambling operator, the gambling regulator, is completely different. The Swedish Gambling Authority did not want to talk to anyone. I can potentially understand why they wouldn't want to talk to the industry, but they didn't want to talk to their regulator colleagues around Europe was a huge mystery to me, and was a huge frustration with the Danish Gambling Authority. We had a very smooth process in Denmark because the Danish Gambling Authority had talked to the industry, but they had also talked to the Italians, to the Brits, to the Maltese, to basically everyone that had online regulation at that time to learn the do's and don'ts. Do you think there's any hope that the Finns might not listen to the industry, but at least to other regulators?
I think there is a likelihood that they don't listen to industry. As I said, the environment is relatively hostile towards us. And but let's hope that it will change. But you raise a good point. I think the legal system, the legal framework, is probably something we can work it out. But the bottleneck in Finland would be the regulatory authority. We don't have those. We don't have human capital. Where do we find individuals to do that? And what the government really should do is to start to build up the authority, very first thing to do, because the legal framework will come there, but we shouldn't build a system where the authority is actually the bottleneck, that we get a good people. And where do we get those people? I don't know. And I think nobody knows in Finland, actually.
So it's a good point. I was talking about examples that you should not follow. Maybe in this regard, Germany is the most likely to mention. So, who came up with a regulator after the market was regulated, which is kind of strange. But yeah, that's definitely an important point.
Yeah, and we shouldn't kind of look on Sweden or Denmark. I think we have an extremely good chance of creating our own very good system. As mathematicians speak, we could get some kind of convex combination of different regulatory systems and mold it to the good one which suits in our country.
And I believe that the message to Finland and to my own jurisdiction and to all European jurisdiction is that the legislator and the regulator cannot only focus on repressive measures. to some extent, they have to hunt down unlicensed operators if they are in Curaçao or wherever they are. But how will they actually reach them? We all know that that is not enough. The most important thing when creating a licensing market, a successful, functioning licensing market, is to create an attractive market where the consumers go by free will. There's no possibility to circumvent that. And that is such a bitter pill for most legislators and regulators to swallow and to accept. But without that acceptance, we cannot reach a satisfactory channelization level, and as a consequence, a satisfactory consumer protection.
Right. We still have some time left, but before we run out, if there are any questions or comments from the attendants, please raise your hand. Otherwise, the politicians and lawyers up here will continue talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I just wanted to attach a little bit to what you just said there, Gustaf. So I don't think that the KSA, the Dutch regulator, needs my defense, but still I feel that I have to say just a little bit on the role they play locally in the Netherlands, because the hostile climate that Mika was referring to is very much also a Dutch thing. We have this special Dutch treat, which is double moral, if you like. And anything that has anything to do with gambling is considered bad. I always say gambling has no friends. That is particularly the case in the Netherlands, until they need some extra tax. But the KSA is under a lot of pressure to be tough and not to be on the lap of the industry. So they are careful not to be buddying up with operators too much. They refer to the operators as those that have been placed under our supervision, which is a terrible Dutch word, onder toezicht gestelden, which made me think back of elementary school. But anyway, so it basically what any market needs is what Gustaf said is the partnership between the government, the regulator, and the regulated operators. Only if they work together, they can make the market work, and they can, create the maximum consumer protection and the maximum channelization rate. That's something that I'm convinced of. And slowly but surely, we're getting there in the Netherlands. And there's just one other thing that I was thinking of. Whenever you're looking to enter a country, even if you're an online company, just make sure you become local as quickly as possible, because no country likes, invading hordes of, international online companies coming to eat from, the local stable and then run away with the profit. Just become local.
I couldn't agree more on that, Peter Paul. If I also may add, when looking at these 4 jurisdictions, I now realize that in every jurisdiction, the state is also a commercial operator. So if I may also add another thing that I believe must change, is that it's usually not a good idea when you play football, for example, that you are a player and the judge in the same game, and that is actually the case in all these 4 jurisdictions. So I do believe that one important change must be that in Sweden's case, that the government sells off its own commercial gambling operator. It is a heritage when they were operating under a monopoly, but nowadays, when there are some 50 online casino licenses, why is the 51st license a Swedish state-owned operator? That is unbelievable.
Aren't they the first?
Yeah, maybe, or the last. Because the state, now I'm really serious, the state must be raised above any suspicion to care about the whole society, what's good for the nation, rather than what is good for the government's own commercial betting company.
I agree.
Yeah, it's a bit of side on that. I think one of the most important things that Finland should do immediately now is actually to guarantee that all gambling issues would be taken away from the Ministry of Interior. Because we have a very perverse system that the same department basically is writing the law, and then the same department is regulating and looking in the police perspective. So it would be productive and civilized way that the making and gambling issues would be transformed, for example, under the Ministry of Finance. And that would also would benefit the kind of general environment concerning the gambling. And of course, the police then have their own role. But now, when everything is under the police board, it's a bit of strange system.
Mm. And get a regulator.
Yeah.
So a final question to all of you before we have to stop. Peter Paul was onto it that the gambling industry has no friends. So I'm keen to ask the three heads of trade associations, are you doing enough to facilitate the industry to actually come up with one voice? Because from what I see in Denmark, the gambling industry can never agree to anything, even whether to have a regulated market or not. What are you doing, and are you making progress?
I think we're making progress. I think that we are good in reactive obstacles, that we are killing bad suggestions from the government and from the legislator, almost 100% of them. But in the long run, obviously, we have to do something about our low reputation. And at the end of the day, we as industry shall be as embraced as any other Swedish industry in my case. In my country, our king is going all over the world together with the defense industry to sell Swedish weapons to other jurisdictions. If that is something to be proud of, and I do believe it is something to be proud of, but why is it then so hard to also focus on the bright and the fun side of this fantastic industry? We have a lot of things to do, yes, but I do believe that at the end of the day, we will be able to speak with one voice.
Yeah, there's of course this issue, and the thing is very new in Finland, but we have a very good cooperation as an association with Veikkaus and BAF. I think we've spoken openly about issues, what we want to have, and of course we do have some different points of view, but generally things are moving in a good direction.
Yeah, so
Final comment.
before I end this, I'd like to say that I really commend the fact that you guys in Finland are stepping over, let's say, old pains and are actively engaging with Veikkaus and others. So for the Netherlands, we have been infighting for tens of years, and finally things are starting, to come together. Trade associations, because we have more than one. Besides NOGA, we're working together on various projects, and who knows, we might even finally come together somewhere in the near future. But I think that this is what we should do: is as an industry, come together and work towards the common goals. Because in the end, we're all competitors, and you all try to get consumers. But for the good of the industry and for consumer protection, channelization, we should work together. That's basically it.
When will the Dutch king promote gambling?
He already is. He's selling postcode lottery.
And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and thank my panel for a good discussion.
Thank you.